Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stephen Breach coming to you here today. I am taking a break from NCAA football 2024, and I'm playing as Hawaii right now. I had a lot of fun making the wrestling videos last week, I guess the last 2 weeks while I was in Florida. Didn't really notice it at the time, but I got stuck in a little bit of a kick watching a lot of like WCW, which I think all started from watching Uncensored 1995. It sort of got, like I just watched an old video of Jim Nye talking about what he thought was the worst pay-per-view of all time. And then I ended up watching 95, and then I ended up watching 1996. There was a lot of questions that sort of came up, and some good memories with WCW. So I guess you can say today I'm stuck in a little bit of a WCW wormhole, where basically I did not watch the entire WCW Bash at the Beach 1995 show. This honestly is a pay-per-view that is the 1 year anniversary of Hulk Hogan in WCW. He debuted against Ric Flair at Bash at the Beach 1994, the year beforehand. But this pay-per-view, I think, was majorly brought to you by the WWF. And now you think like how the WWF was able to roll WCW to have a pay-per-view in Huntington Beach, on the beach, not in an arena, with what they claim to be over 100,000 fans out in the sun watching this show. I think honestly it's been reported that it's closer to about 10,000 WCW wrestling fans that showed up that day. But I think honestly the biggest draw of this pay-per-view, that why it is made to be, they did not cover the bill, but I think it was the exposure of Baywatch asking Hulk Hogan to bring his WCW friends to film an episode. This episode, of course, is about, trying to save the rec center that Ric Flair and Kevin Sullivan with Vader are trying to step in and buy the rec center and turn it into some sort of like business investment deal. It's been a while since I've seen this, but I think honestly the reason why Baywatch asked WCW to come along was, I believe, that because of the Royal Rumble that had Pamela Anderson in January, I think that that got the Baywatch people looking around, that wow, wrestling is willing to bring us in. How is it that we can get a rub from wrestling? Now, it was not a return where basically the WWF was asked to come, because I think Hulk Hogan was the biggest wrestling star in the time. Definitely the Royal Rumble 1995, Shawn Michaels, Diesel. You look at it now, they got a lot of Hall of Famers on the roster. You got Bret the Hitman Hart, but I don't think anybody was really like a marquee name like Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan was able to bring him. He was able to bring the Macho Man. Ric Flair might not have like the main marquee of wrestling names, but he was one of the biggest stars that there was. Vader, debatable. Definitely Kevin Sullivan, where they fit into wrestling stars at the time. But I think that you just needed bad guys for Hulk Hogan to beat up. So basically, because of the filming of the Baywatch episode, they bring the ring, they bring the crew out to Huntington Beach. It is a very stunning scene for a pay-per-view. Once you fired it up on the network and you basically see, it's almost like Hog Wild or Road Wild, where they would set up in the middle of the biker rally in Sturgis, because there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of people who like to drink beer, and if you have beer at the wrestling event, people will show up. This is just a ring on the beach. During one of the matches with Paul Orndorff actually picks up the sand and he throws it in the Renegade's face. Renegade, a throwback to the Uncensored episode that we did, I believe, 2 weeks ago, while we're there. But the main event of this show that brought everybody to the beach was a steel cage match that was Vader against Hulk Hogan. These are guys that have been battling back and forth to see who is like the biggest guy. They have a history of not really getting along during their matches during the Uncensored. I think I was getting so fired up talking about the strap match. I didn't even talk about the fact that when Hulk Hogan won the strap match at the show, Hulk Hogan didn't even beat Vader. He beat Ric Flair, who was not even supposed to be there, who was kind of acting as Vader's manager, that was not even on the roster because he had put his career on the line earlier against Hulk Hogan. I think that, you know, the it doesn't work for me brother card was played, and Vader didn't really want to just straight up do the job because he just felt like he kept on losing over and over and over again, to the fact that once they brought the match back at Slamboree, it had to be a tag match with Hogan and Macho going up against Vader and Ric Flair. The next show, which was Slamboree, no, I apologize. The Great American Bash was the show that was headlined. That was the main event. That was Savage against Flair. Hogan and Vader get in a fight as Savage is trying to make his way to the ring, which is very weird because Hogan and Vader both don't work on that show. That show's in the middle of Ohio. It wasn't really like it was a drive down the street. Hogan had to have been flown in. He didn't wrestle on the show. I don't know if he had some sort of an injury, but I think we've all seen the stats on Hulk Hogan's contract where basically for every pay-per-view, he basically gets a huge cut of what sales WCW did. He also gets a huge percentage of like merch that was sold, even if it's not his, because obviously everybody going to the WCW show is going to see Hulk Hogan. And I don't think Hogan was just like, oh, this one's on me, brother. Don't worry about it. I'll just show up. I don't need to wrestle. I'm sure he still asked for his pay. I'm sure he still asked for his cut of the pay-per-view. He still asked for his revenue and any other money that he could have asked for like wearing the Hulkamania t-shirt at the time. I'm sure he got a huge check for not even wrestling that night. But on this day, on the beach, Hulk Hogan is brought out by none other than Dennis Rodman. Hulk Hogan at the time, I think he honestly is just cashing in every favor that he's able to do at the time. At the Bash of the Beach the year before, Mr. T was there. I believe he was a special guest referee. Shaquille O'Neal was in his corner, walked him out to the ring. Here, Dennis Rodman, not really the biggest star in basketball in the time, but definitely one of the biggest characters that is out there, where people just look at him like, I don't know what's going on with this guy. At that time, there really wasn't anybody else in the world like him. He did the publicity stunt where he married himself at his book signing in New York City. He wore a dress on the cover of the book. It was just one thing after another of just like, what's going on with this guy? But this match, honestly, for a steel cage match outside, was a very, very good match. A lot of back and forth. Hogan, the normal Hulk Hogan match. Hogan gets the early advantage in the match, where basically he uses his shirt to choke Vader, throws him headfirst into the cage. It goes back and forth. Hogan tries to slam Vader. His back goes out. Best spot of the whole entire night is that for some reason, when Vader got into the cage, the big Vader helmet that he used to wear in the days of WCW got to stay in the ring. Why they would leave a weapon like that inside of the ring, no idea. Hulk Hogan actually puts on the Vader mask, headbutts Vader. They go back and forth. At one point, Ed Leslie, Brutus the Barber Beefcake as the Zodiac, and Kevin Sullivan try to get involved in this. Dennis Rodman runs them off with a steel cage, a steel chair. and he's fighting the fight. But we had Hogan who gets the win against Vader. This ends up being a blow off match for the fact that once the pay-per-view is done, and everybody says goodbye, it stays with the action. Much like sometimes WWE tries to fool you with their pay-per-views now, where they put the logo up because everybody thinks once the logo's up, the show's over, and something big happens. That's the same thing. Ric Flair comes into the ring. Ric Flair has been a big advocate for Vader now that he's a wrestler and he's on the card. He's coming down there. He's yelling at Vader. He's pushing him, telling him basically that he blew it. Why Ric Flair would want Vader to be the guy that that beats Hogan, I don't know. It doesn't really make sense to me. You would think that Flair wants to be the champion himself. But basically, he came back at Slamboree. He lost the match in a tag match with Vader. He lost to Macho Man at the last show in the main event. He lost to Macho Man in the lifeguard match, a.k.a. Dudes on the Outside, lumberjack match at this show. So why Flair is upset at Vader for losing to Hulk Hogan when when Ric Flair can't even beat Randy Savage, doesn't really make any sense to me at all. But basically, Vader snaps. He goes after Flair and Arn Anderson. Arn runs right out the cage door. Ric Flair, I don't even know how he does it, but he basically jumps out of the cage in one jump. He doesn't climb. He just straight up grabs the thing and flips over and is like, I don't want no part of that. Once they're on the outside, Vader challenges Ric Flair and Arn Anderson to a match, which I'm guessing is probably going to be played off on TV or something like that. The only negative about this whole deal is that the next pay-per-view in line would be the Collision in Korea. That was actually filmed 2 months beforehand. Is finally going to be shown on pay-per-view. So the next pay-per-view is actually taped. The next live pay-per-view after that is going to be Fall Brawl, which would be War Games. This pays off because what we saw was actually a Vader face turn. Vader was supposed to join Team Hulkamania, where it was supposed to be Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Sting, and Vader going up against the Faces of the Faces of Fear, Kevin Sullivan, the Zodiac, Kamala, and Earthquake, the Shark. Is that the four that was supposed to be? One of the most lopsided War Games of all time. It must have been very exciting at the time to see Team Hulkamania all come together in one match. But it's gonna have big flashbacks to basically Savage and Hogan beating everybody at uncensored in that big steel cage match where they beat Flair, Anderson, Ming, Barbarian, Lex Luger, Zeus, Kevin Sullivan, and that mystery guy with the huge arms that I think played Bane in one of the early Batman movies. I got no clue, but Vader ends up getting in a fist fight with Paul Orndorff, and Vader ends up getting fired. He goes back to work for New Japan Wrestling before actually showing up in the WWF. Why we went through that whole ordeal is that basically they filmed the Baywatch episode that they're building this around right now because it has to be, shot, edited, and then actually put in the rotation to air. Once the Baywatch episodes actually airs, Vader's gone. Vader's working for WWF. I believe it airs in February. He debuts in January. So there's really doesn't really make a lot of sense why a WWF guy is fighting with the WCW guys on a Baywatch episode. But then again, I think the normal people who were watching Baywatch at the time don't really they don't really care about what's going on in Baywatch anyways. But, we played off at the beginning with the whole Baywatch deal about how, WWF didn't have the stars at the time to support it. And that's why, even though they probably noticed wrestling as a market for Baywatch because of the Royal Rumble with the WWF, Shawn Michaels ends up getting to film an episode of Baywatch where has nothing to do with wrestling. I think he's like a hitman / bodyguard. Some of the worst acting that you have ever seen. I think that there was bad blood between him, Pamela Anderson, and Tommy Lee. That, Michaels gets the job. I think he thinks it's going to lead to bigger things, so he does Baywatch. But even in the scenes that he's acting with Pamela Anderson, you can read the body chemistry that, like, Michaels wants nothing to do with Pamela Anderson. Some of the worst stuff you've ever seen before. Have you ever seen a GIF of Shawn Michaels looking through the binoculars? And he's kind of dressed up. I think he's even wearing like a turtleneck on the beach. That's where it's from. I wondered for forever until I watched a breakdown of the Baywatch episodes on YouTube one day. But an awesome match right here. You got to see the face turn, which leads to why Vader is supposed to be on Team Hulkamania at War Games before he goes AWOL and is replaced by Lex Luger, which honestly is just as good as a replacement when it comes to like building Team Hulkamania of the All-Stars of All-Stars of WCW. So, this was a good one. Peace out. See you guys down the road.